So what do you guys know about it so far? What are the basics you know about what's going on with the USA, Ukraine, Russia, NATO?
Well, to my understanding, I thought Ukraine was trying to join NATO, and the United States is trying to get them to come along. Russia, United States, we've already had that pre-existing tension from the Cold War in the last couple decades. Russia is really trying to take over Ukraine. U.S. is stepping in, and there's some conflict within the country on whether we should step in, whether we should hold back because Ukraine's actually not part of NATO yet as of now.
Yeah, no, pretty much those are the basics. They want to join NATO, but I believe there was an agreement made between Russia and United States and European nations and NATO back close to the end of the Cold War, where we said that we wouldn't continue to expand NATO closer to Russia's borders. But I mean, at this point, that's violating what we told them we weren't going to do. So I would say that's the biggest thing going on. What about you, John? What have you heard?
Yeah, no, similar. Just the whole aspect of them wanting to. The reason why Russia wants to take it over is because of the cushion between other nations and themselves. Ukraine is it's like a little filler between them. So they, like we talked about before, they still have a belief that there's still some diehard Russian in there, or that want to be part of Russia. So he's kind of using that card too, but it could be both sides of the fence too, like in regards to if they do decide to go in and do it, he's kind of like trying to test what the United States is willing to do too, with the whole aspect of, whether it's them getting them off of the SWIFT system, putting, boundaries on trades, things like that too. Like that could happen on that aspect.
Yeah, because Biden already threatened. He said for sure if Russia decides to invade Ukraine, that he's going to put every sanction imaginable to pretty much make their economy like completely worthless and crumble to the ground.
So when you said take them off of SWIFT, so what exact repercussions does that really have for Russia?
So the SWIFT system is basically how the world transfers money within each other, right? If they're transferring money between nation to nation, all of that. So if they put, those boundaries or regulations on them to not allow them to do that, they're basically taking them off of the world financial system, is essentially what they're doing. They're forcing their hand on, if you want to do this, then we're not going to basically allow you to trade with the world in regards to trading currencies and money. Having that capability of transferring that way. So what could happen is Russia could, push on cryptocurrencies, which they're starting. Vladimir Putin just recently said that they're going to be more open with cryptocurrencies because that takes them off of the playing field that is set right now with the world powers. Like all the nations right now, the United States is on top. If you mess with the United States, United Nations, they can kick you off of the world, really mess with your country, like you said. But Russia can now lean towards Bitcoin because the United States and the UN has nothing to do with Bitcoin. They can't control that. You know what I mean? And that's kind of a global system too, to be able to get away from the old system and give power to the new system.
Yeah.
So the system that they're trying to kick them off of, so it just prevents Russia from exchanging their currency to other currencies?
It's a Swiss. I'm not really too familiar with the whole aspect of it, but I do know that that's what the whole world uses. It's the SWIFT financial system to be able to transfer money between each other.
Yeah, like when you go and do a wire, like let's say to an international bank, you need a SWIFT code. So that way they can find that country's.
That makes sense. And I'm guessing like there's central banks that run the SWIFT system.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense. So yeah, no, it definitely would help their economy if they switched over to something like Bitcoin or they backed their currency off of that.
It removes it, and that's what there's a lot of rumors too. I don't know how legit they are or not, but there's a lot of rumors of the U.S. pushing towards El Salvador and telling them, they want them to remove that as an option of illegal tender, because that essentially does kind of put them in a place where other nations are going to be able to see that. Just like other companies are going to be able to see, like McDonald's inside of El Salvador takes Bitcoin as a payment. you know, and they take US dollar. They don't have their currency because of what their nation, basically the whole inflation issue on their end, just like what's happening with Venezuela and other nations. Their currency is going to shit. But essentially what they're doing is they're leaning, they still take US dollar, which is what is king of the world today, basically. And they're taking Bitcoin. Other countries are going to be able to start seeing what's being more beneficial within companies like McDonald's, other, you know, companies within El Salvador taking Bitcoin and seeing how that appreciates versus the US dollar, which is depreciating. You know, and other nations are going to see that as, you know, El Salvador is getting richer because of their investment in Bitcoin. You know, and if Russia starts backing it too, Russia starts putting their money into it, you know, who else? I mean, we already know that China and North Korea, there's rumors that they've been using it too. They've been deep in it too. So it could be something that they're trying to get ahead of the United States and, you know, the world powers right now.
Yeah.
So I have a question. How does the United States go from where we are right now to what, let's say, El Salvador is doing and make our United States currency or, you know, tender Bitcoin? How do we do that? Because I feel like we have a lot of people in our current legislation and current Congress, and even our the executive branch, the presidency, like they're really backwards on Bitcoin. So how do we get that traction to go forward?
I personally think that it's probably going to be similar to how it happened in El Salvador. So they had a currency, right? From my understanding, their currency went to shit. And then they adopted U.S. currency because their currency went to shit. And then after that, then that's when they started adopting Bitcoin. And I feel like that now they're in a transition from less U.S. currency and more Bitcoin currency. I'm assuming that the U.S. dollar will eventually fall, and we have no other choice but to adopt another type of currency. That's my understanding, or that's what I think will happen.
I don't think that the Bitcoin will ever be the main legal tender for the United States. I think it'll be like gold. You know, like if you look back at history, you know, with all these different nations, even prior to current civilizations, gold has always been hard money. Gold is God's money. It's money that is anywhere you go in the world, you can melt that gold and it will still retain value. The value is basically consistent throughout the world. You know what I mean? The fiat money depends on the price, because of course if you're going to Mexico, it's going to cost you more because their currency is worth less than the US dollar than if you bought it in the United States. But it still has that value all around the world, and it's had it for a long time. The reason why is because it's sustainable. It doesn't, you know, it lasts a long time. So essentially the whole thing with Bitcoin, them converting that into their digital currency, I think will be kind of that aspect where you can hold it as an asset, and I think it'll be a main asset that the United States holds. And I think they're starting to understand where this is going. You know, these next couple weeks, next week specifically, they're going to start looking at regulating, you know, so this is basically a turning point in history. Is the United States going to be pro Bitcoin, or are they going to be more, you know, against it, trying to regulate it more to, you know, avoid that from taking over what's on top right now, toppling the dollar? Because that's where it's at right now. If you look at where we're at in today's world, the US dollar is king. That's what basically is, and that's depreciating because of everything that's going on. Global debt, we have 3 times the amount of gold money printed. So if everything were to go to crap, that money is just useless. It's you know, it's going to be worth nothing because we have so much of it.
Yeah, and also it could go also the way of, instead of the federal government doing something, the states. Like recently what's going on with California, they introduced a bill to make a Bitcoin legal tender. Arizona did too, so it could also go that way.
So I think though, in the long run, it seems like the United States isn't really going towards, you know, embracing it, and
I think they are.
They are?
I think they will, because they're seeing what's happening, what's playing out, because there's only 21 million Bitcoin. There's already 18 million in circulation. The last Bitcoin will be mined in 2140, I believe. So we'll be long dead before then. But that means that it's still priced out and gapped out like the creator Satoshi Nakamoto made it this way so we don't have an interference in being able to abuse that system. Because that's what's wrong with if you look at history, not just the United States, all nations have had control of their currency, right? Which, what do humans have capability of? Greed. They have, they have the capability of being compromised within and doing something that doesn't benefit the nation but themselves. And that's usually what essentially is going to happen with the US dollar taking that gold reserve off, pushing themselves to be able to print however much money they want. Now gives them years later shows that, we didn't take any of that money out of circulation.
So last question then. Who in the long run, right? Not like short 5-year, 10-year term. Us versus Russia versus China, all these other countries that are trying to get ahead of each other. Who wins and why?
What's your opinion?
I think it depends. Just to give it short and sweet, it just depends on this upcoming week what Biden decides. It really comes down to what all these agencies, because he's giving power to each agency to investigate on their own and come up with a thesis of what they should do, and they're all going to meet and talk about it. So if they have people that are knowledgeable on Bitcoin and this blockchain technology, what it's going to do to the world, I think they embrace it. And if they embrace it and they dive in and we get in as much as we can, I think the United States will stay on top. But if we don't understand Bitcoin, then whoever understands that, will be the winner, I think.
I think there's a chance of that happening. I feel like it could be 50-50, but I probably think China is just at this point, since they've been, like you said, already ahead of the game in the U.S. in regards to mining more Bitcoin. I think in the end they end up on top. That's my opinion, because they already started ahead of the game. The U.S. is barely starting, like John said. Look at these things, come up with regulation and stuff, but we haven't gotten to the point where we said, okay, we need to mine this stuff. The U.S. needs to mine this. The U.S. needs to get ahead of the game, where China's already been there. So that's my opinion.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, honestly, I think the United States is gonna be very combative at first. I think in the next couple of weeks, and I'm really hopeful that they're not, but I think they're gonna be very backwards on Bitcoin, and it's gonna hurt us in the long run. I think it's really going to be up to whoever embraces it first, just like how you said. And I think China's been embracing it for a long time. And their only problem is, their own problems within. So
I think China, just to kind of give a last combative thing, China's already ahead, but China is not. I don't think they'll push Bitcoin as much as you think, just because they don't want their people to understand decentralization. They want control. So that's why they made it illegal to mine Bitcoin in China.
That's their Achilles heel.
Yeah, but they still have. That doesn't mean the Chinese government can acquire. Just something to think about.